Thank you all for joining us tonight for our webinar about technology and fear-free and improving your workflow efficiency in your practice. I'm Jennifer Merlo. I am the Director of Veterinary Affairs here at Fear-Free. I've been with the company for almost 2 years. Some of you have talked to me through email. Some of you know me in person. And if you haven't met me, I would love to chat with you and get to know you more. Always happy to talk about fear-free with everybody. We are super excited to have Nancy with us tonight. Nancy has spent over 30 years in the veterinary profession in technical related positions, from software and hardware to digital x-ray and marketing. This led to about 13 years of consulting with practices on technical needs. She has helped with IT support as well as visiting thousands of practices over time, and she brings a unique perspective into the technical side of veterinary medicine and how technology workflow can have an impact on patient care. I also want to note that Nancy has been a member of Vet Partners for over 15 years and has served 5 years on the board of directors and is a past president. And she's also a fear-free certified professional, which we love. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm sure that, like she said, many of you are coming to the end of your day and you're just like, oh, it's time to be done. But so hopefully you can just kind of sit back and relax, and we'll kind of move forward with, all things next in the world of tech. I know many people look at me kind of funny when they're like, you were fear-free certified? I don't understand. Where that came from was working with practices. Part of my consulting is I do a lot of observations. And I was observing in a practice a lot of stress that was happening. And a lot of that was kind of around, technology was a piece of it, right? And I got to thinking about things. And Jennifer and I had a conversation, I think probably back in February. And we're like, there's kind of a fit here. So that's where this came about. So that's why you have a tech geek in front of you talking about fear-free. We're going to talk about technology and kind of what we see in practices and how we can utilize and think about some of the items a little differently. We want to be able to not have to invest in a lot of things, but just really rethink how we go about it. We'll talk a little bit about how some of the technology and the processes that we're using today affect pet parents and the pets, and really try to help think outside the box. What I noticed recently in traveling this last year was that a lot of us just don't people as well anymore as we used to after the last few years. Practices had to change, adapt, adopt all sorts of new technology. You guys did wonderful work, just, turning on a dime and trying to figure out how to continue to serve pets and their pet owners. And so now it's trying to work back into, oh, well, we used to do it this way, so let's go right back to that. And what I've observed is sometimes that isn't always the best or doesn't always work as smoothly as we hoped. So as I go through this, feel free to put those questions in Q&A. I'll make sure that we leave time for them at the end, and I will do my best to answer them. So as Jennifer said, I've been hanging out with veterinarians for a long time. I worked in the software industry for a while, and then worked for, in a couple other industries, and just decided really I wanted to help practices. So I am kind of a bridge. You'll find that I don't offer an IT service or anything like that. So I'm not going to answer, deep questions in that aspect, but I'm a bridge, and I'm here to help practices kind of understand more about technology and how we can utilize it for efficiency in the practice. So when we walk into the front door, I start all of my consults and conversations with my practices. Let's think about how things are when we walk in the front door. Normal waiting room, there's probably a front desk, staff to greet everybody most of the time. There's probably a scale in that area that the pets, may or may not like. There's going to be printing going on. There could be phones ringing, credit cards. All of these different pieces of technology tend to be in that front area. And so what we want to do is think about how can we utilize them differently. One example would be You might have a PC or a tablet or something up front where they can apply for financial assistance, for example. So think about all the things in your practice in that front area when they first come in the door. What types of things are they exposed to? As I said, we don't people as well anymore. I noticed that with myself attending large conferences. I felt a little bit more drained at the end of the day. So I started looking into this. And it was interesting to read some of the statistics about the increase in anxiety over time. And so, how can we help that? Obviously, fear free is about reducing the stress for a pet. What I noticed is we need to reduce stress a little bit for the pet parent before the pet can really kick in. Forbes, I think it was, said that during COVID, 78% of people that own pets got pets. That's a lot of new pet owners. I'm sure some in that statistic were actually owners prior and added animals. But there's a lot of people that may not be as used to the way things used to be in a practice, right? They didn't have pets before. A new study from NBC said that pets can tell when we're stressed. I think most of us that have pets, we get that, you know? I still remember when I was growing up, my pet cat knew when my sister got a headache. So they're very in tune to us. But this study from NBC actually says that dogs can smell the stress that people give off. So think about that. You know, we talk about reducing and changing the smells and pheromones and all those different things. A lot of it could be coming from that pet owner. So how can we help them? I agree there's a increase. I'm not sure I agree with the decrease that they talked about in that last study. I think that there's a decrease in stress a little bit at home. You know, they're starting to get back into the swing. But when they get out into the world and they have to deal with a bunch of different things, it's not as easy. So there's many contributing factors for anxiety for humans in a practice. Everything from, you know, helping get in the door, sometimes just getting them in the door of the car. We all know how that can be. And the more they get resistance from the pet, the more anxious the owner gets. It's kind of a never-ending circle, right? So we have to think about what they're going through. They could be having other things going on in their life, financial stresses. Any of that is going to contribute to that pet stress as well. They want the pet to behave. Just like, you know, when you go shopping, you want your child to behave. They want their pet to behave. They get all worked up when the pet's not behaving. Sometimes just helping them understand it's okay if the dog barks a little bit. That's okay. The dog's expressing his anxiety. Filling out forms is an area that I see where pet parents struggle a little bit. They're busy working with their pet, and you have a form that they need to fill out, whether it's, you know, from finance or whatever, but they have stuff to do. And that makes it hard. A lot of times I see this like on a clipboard. So they're balancing a clipboard, they're balancing pens, whatever. That's difficult. So if we think ahead, what kinds of things can we help them from a technology standpoint, do those forms ahead of time? A lot of the practice management softwares can actually send out forms. You can store forms on your website. The biggest thing I see in a practice is that it's getting the rest of the staff to keep telling the pet owner to do this ahead of time because they generally show up without them. They just need to be reminded. I think for them, once they start getting used to some of that, they'll do it. But making it easy, don't have it, you know, a novel, but make sure that you get the information you need and have it easily accessible to them beforehand. That way, when they get in the door, you already have that information. You can relay that information ahead of time to any of the staff that's going to be dealing with them, and you won't have to worry about it. Dealing with things like finances. This is another area that I see a lot of times where I think utilizing technology and workflow can help. None of us wants to have to ask for help or financial help or, you know, even deal with finances. Sometimes it's a struggle, but making sure that this isn't happening at the front desk. If you have the ability to do it in the exam room or even an offside area where they're not right in the middle of the exam room or right in the middle of the reception area trying to do their financial stats or whatever, even getting estimates and dealing with that kind of finance is much better accepted if it's not right in front of everybody. I have seen some very negative experiences, and when those negative experiences happen, it actually is just as bad for your staff in the hospital as it is for that pet parent. They get upset, they are, not happy about whatever they're being shown or talked to about if it's out in a kind of a general area. So thinking about what technology can we move out of that front area so that they don't have to try to think about it. And answering questions of pet history even can be difficult. So think about that as a workflow in the practice. I know that it's hard sometimes because space is limited, but even if you can get into a quieter area, that helps reduce that stress for that owner an enormous amount. So here's some of the solutions. So a lot of this I talk as I go through, so I apologize if I'm jumping ahead on some of my slides. But again, putting it on the website, being able to send it out via text. Check with your software company. A lot of them can do it. Some of them have pet portals that you can log in and have access to it that way. Getting that automatic information into the practice gives you a chance also, if there's something they're missing, you can call them ahead of time and ask them for the additional information. That's way better than if they're coming in and they have to call someone at home to try to get extra information or whatever. A call from the practice ahead of time just to kind of assist them and ease their navigation through those forms is super helpful. It's also a perfect time to discuss payment so that they're aware that they're going to have payment at time of service when they're coming in, or they could even apply for financial assistance before they get in the hospital so that they can have, that piece out of the way. So any of those types of things I find really does make a difference. Forms are, as I said earlier, something that's hard to get sometimes from clients, but it's important. And I wish I was in a room with a show of hands, but there are a lot of practices that don't even get these forms. And today it's something that you really should be doing. It's a piece of technology you should be using one way or the other so that you have signatures for everything you're doing, for treatments, for, get an estimate signed if it's for a surgery or even if it's for a complicated case. I see all too often practices have to discount, or they feel that they have to discount when somebody gets upset, not knowing things ahead of time. So making sure that you have that information definitely makes the life a lot easier for that front desk staff. The next area I'm going to talk a little bit about gets kind of geeky. We all carry our phones around with us today. We have them 24/7, it feels like. The pet owners will have them in their hands in the practice, and they're going to want to get on the network. Most of the time, or the internet, I should say, most of the time in a practice, depending on your building, you may not get internet. They might not be able to get their mobile internet. So they want to have access. Make sure you have a guest network set up in your practice so that you don't have any pet owners accessing your main network. That's easily done with an IT company. They can set up a separate network that's accessible for your guests. That's also a good area for your staff if they're going to be on the internet for other reasons other than business, that they can use that technology as well. If they have access to that internet, they're more likely to fill out forms, maybe on their phone, when they're sitting in the exam room or when they're sitting in the waiting area, to give them that access to the portals and that type of stuff. But today, it's just not a good idea to allow people to be on your existing network that runs the rest of your practice. There's just so many things that can happen across the board when it comes to, the people that don't seem to have anything better to do than to cause ruckus for everyone else with viruses and things like that. So if you are allowing people to be on your network, even if it's just your staff, you need to make that change sooner than later and install a guest network, put up a little sign. Don't make them come and ask you for access. Put up a sign that says this is how you get to our internet for our guests. And that will also help relieve the stress, because you'll be shocked at how many people will sit there and play games or whatever else it is that they pass the time with. Again, it's using technology there so that they can help take their mind off of what's going on in the practice. Remember, if there's questions, please pop them into the Q&A tonight. That'd be great for us. So when I'm talking about the guest network, scammers don't want your data. You do. We are seeing more and more practices that are falling victim of ransomware, which means they're getting a virus that jumps on their computer, whether that comes in whatever form it comes in, and we'll talk about some of the ways it gets there. But it gets into the computer, and at a certain point in time, it locks up the computer and it's holding your data for ransom. And these bad actors know that most veterinarians are paying to get that back. So there's several lines of defense when we're talking about security here. This is also securing your client's information. So this is part of it, so that they feel secure with their credit card or whatever. So making sure that anybody that brings something into the practice, maybe on a USB drive, a lot of times they'll bring in records. That's not a good idea to plug that right into your computer. There are programs that can scan those for you. So talk to your IT group. If you are doing this on a regular basis to transfer records, talk to your IT group about setting up something that would be safe for you to do that, because that's one way that things jump from computer to computer. Making sure that you're scanning credit cards in versus just keying them in or taking things over the phone. I hear a lot of times people are repeating credit cards in the reception area. That's not a great idea. It's also not a great idea to key in the card information. So if you have the ability to scan, that's also much safer, and makes your clients feel safer and more secure about what's happening with their data. There is no practice management software that is PCI compliant. Oh, it's like part of my word disappeared. PCI compliant is what your banks are using for data encryption. If in the practice you're taking credit cards through a processing company, those are compliant, but do not ever store your client's information in your practice management software. Not credit cards, not social security numbers, not driver's license, none of that should be stored in those practice management softwares. So making sure that we're really careful with our technology and our clients' data. When it says repeating information for all to hear, that's like, don't repeat credit card information out loud. Please don't. Emails. We're talking a lot about using emails to go back and forth with our clients to get information from them ahead of time, make things easier for them. We also need the staff to be aware that these bad actors will send in emails that look very valid that aren't. And so talking to your staff about clicking on random emails, it could look like it's coming from FedEx, but one of the best ways to see that it's not is to hover over that email address before you click on anything. So that goes a long way to helping protect your system. Once you click on those, again, they have the ability to get to your computer a lot of times. So as we're using technology more and more, what I wanted to do here was kind of bring out, here's some of the safeguards that you need to put in place that's making sure you're kind of paying attention to that. Scammer phone calls. This is happening, and now we're hearing about more and more from the AI version where they're calling in and, man, they sound real, but they're not. They're scammers. And so talk to staff about it. There's things you can key on, not great English. Same thing with the emails. The emails have horrible English in the most of the time when they're scam emails. They might have a logo that looks like FedEx, but I can show you how to copy a FedEx logo. Doesn't mean it's real. So watching for those types of things, because as you start to use this technology more and more, there'll be more and more traffic coming through the door and coming through the phone and coming through your email. So it's really important to pay attention. If you get a scammer call and they're like, we need to transfer these records or whatever, there's all sorts of creative ways they're doing this. Ask them for a phone number, have the staff ask them for a phone number and call them back, or ask them what practice they're calling from, whatever. They're getting creative. So we got to be just about as creative to go back the other direction sometimes. So never give anybody access to your computer, no matter what they say when they call on the phone. They're not Microsoft checking up on you. So again, it's really going kind of making security awareness overall as we're adding more and more technology into the practices and wanting to communicate with our clients more and more. So reducing parent focus upon arrival. What I noticed was a lot of times pet parents are trying so hard to get the animals to cooperate and types of things like that. I mentioned the scale. Sometimes the scale can be a scary thing for the pets. So working with the pet owner to help ease that animal onto a scale, for example, or looking at your scale technology that you have in house. How quickly is that weight recorded? Is that scale slippery? Does it make any noises? A lot of different ways to look at these scales. They're electronic, they're part of your technology. They're recording things for you. But again, I see this as a stressor when I'm watching, when I just sit in the corner and kind of watch what's going on. It's a fearful area for the pets, and that makes it more anxious for those pet owners. So using all the techniques you've been taught through Fair Free to help reduce the stress with that pet is going to definitely help with the pet owner, but kind of preempting with the pet owner, here's what we're going to do, here's the way we'll approach it. And sometimes just kind of backing a little bit away and help, letting that pet owner have that time with the pet, that can help too. So just, you want to be really positive about the whole thing, but kind of work with them to get it. I've seen a lot of times where the pets are just, they feel forced, and that's a piece of technology we don't need anybody being scared of. In the exam room, there's a lot of scary things to pets and owners in the exam room sometimes, but making sure that you have easy access to the records and x-rays and educational information in the exam room so that the veterinarian can focus on the pet, and maybe the technician or nurse can help bring up x-rays and do some of the other types of things that need to be done on the computer in there, but helping that interface so that there's not as much time needed to be done with that technology. So I think of things like bundle codes, how do we get our medical records in faster so that we're able to help the client? One thing I've noticed and watched happen, it's really kind of a cool thing, is utilizing a scribe in the exam room. When you're in the exam room with your pet and the doctor's talking to you, they'll ask questions and whatever. And if they're trying to do their medical records, or they're going to do them outside the room, they're usually pretty quiet about what they're doing. They just, they're petting the animal. They're just trying to keep everybody happy. If you have a scribe in the exam room, there's going to be kind of a twofold purpose there. One, medical records are going to get done. That helps free up your end of day. That's a bonus, right? The other thing is, I've had feedback that when the doctor's verbalizing their exam, the pet owner has a different experience. They feel that there's a better exam going on because they're hearing what's going on. It has nothing to do with how that doctor is doing the exam. Honestly, they've been doing the same exam for a very long time, but it's how they verbalize so that the person recording gets that information that's helping the pet owner. Now, there's a fine line to walk here. You don't want to scare the pet owner either, right? But you want to be able to get that information across. It helps them feel like they're getting more bang for their buck. Honestly, they're getting the same exam. They're just getting more knowledge out of it. I was recently working with an equine veterinarian, and we talked about this. And so I observed while she was working with one of her patients and the owner, and she was explaining what she was doing. And she said that was, for her, she said it was great because she had never done that before, or didn't do a lot of it. And she agreed that not every pet owner can handle the same amount of information. So it's important we think about that. But the pet owner was kind of excited about the whole thing. She felt like it was a learning process for her. So think about doing something like that, utilizing the ability to have that technology. There's more and more that's even automated technology that will take your voice information and turn it into text. So there are different places that you can use that, but it really does help the pet owner see what's going on in the exam. Modern technology in the exam room, I also find, equates to what people feel is behind the door. So if you have aged equipment in the exam room, what they see, it gives them maybe a little bit of anxiety about what you might have that they can't see in the back. You could have millions of dollars, CT scanner and all the blood machines in the world. But if they don't see that kind of technology and that technology use in the exam rooms, they may not really feel confident in what's going on behind the door. Today, people expect technology, quite honestly. They see it everywhere and they expect it. And they, if it's something old looking in the exam room, and honestly, I've been around long enough where we used to say, just put the old computers in the exam room. They're not used a lot. That's really not the case anymore. That's not where we want old computers, because we want them to function well and we want to be able to utilize them for our pet owners. And we also want that perception. Okay, so that's just another way to think about how do we view our technology and how does our pet owner view our technology. So I'm going to touch a little bit on artificial intelligence. There's there'll be way more articles to come on this subject. This is tip of the iceberg. There are pros and cons across the board when it comes to artificial intelligence. But I think that it's something that as a veterinary community as a whole, we have to address. We're going to have our pet owners are going to start using this more and more to do their own research. And honestly, I think that's going to raise their anxiety level a little bit, because we don't have any control over what they're being told. So I've long been a proponent for practices sharing as much educational information via like their website as they can. You want to be that source of technology that your clients go to for their answers. I'm going to repeat that. You want to be that source. You have no control over these AI type of search engines. So if you start to train your clients now to utilize that technology and kind of boost up your educational content in your areas of online presence, they're going to learn to go to you before they're going to turn to AI. So I'm just kind of giving a preemptive kind of idea out there that we want them to be connected to you in the digital sense. So artificial intelligence isn't going to go away. It's only going to keep going. I think it can be a benefit in a lot of ways, but I also think that it is going to cause some stress and anxiety along the way. And so even having a conversation with your clients about that, if they're coming in and they're like hitting you with every kind of disease they might think their pet has. So have you been talking to Google Chat or Chat GPT or one of those other engines? They're probably going to say yes, because I think this is going to be worse than Dr. Google. And we've been fighting Dr. Google for a long time. So it's something we need to be aware of as technology moves forward. It's something we need to understand is probably going to add some stress across the board. So I have said for a long time that education is marketing, and education and marketing equal compliance. They all go very well together. So it's really nothing new. We've been using technology in the veterinary field for many years. I remember back in the early days, way back in the early days, when I first started going on site to train practices, and I'm like, I just don't understand how this thing's going to ever pay for itself. And the first, and I'm talking, like a 300 megabyte hard drive was thousands of dollars back then. And the first practice I went into, he had a stack of reminders in the corner. And I'm like, oh, how long does that take to do every month? And he goes, every month, that's like 3 months worth. And I'm like, well, let me show you what technology can do for you. And, automated reminders were now in that practice. So we've come so far from that type of scenario, right? We don't usually print them in practice anymore. If they're printed at all, they're done through a service. But it's really about getting that information in the hands of our clients, making sure they have every way possible using technology, because that's what they're going to do to get the education from you. So take-home instructions, if you have several take-home instructions that you maybe are printing or emailing to them, make sure you have copies of that on your website so it's easy for them to get to and go look at. Over communicate, hearing more than once. So if you're sending something home with them, again, make sure it's on the website. Maybe you send them a reminder to look at this information that you've given them. Maybe it's for care of a wound. Maybe it's for ear cleaning, all of those types of things. It's very easy to get that. It's meeting them where they're at. I don't know how many of you have Facebook pages, but a lot of times the Facebook pages I've seen in practices just have ads, sometimes from the pharmacies on them or something like that. Think about putting tips and tricks in that area. That's where a lot of these people are at. They're on social media. They're on, LinkedIn, not as many on LinkedIn, probably looking for pet stuff, but they're out there. Facebook for sure. And some of the other, Twitter, whatever. Find an area where you can start putting some of that information out using that technology, helping them feel more comfortable in understanding how they're going to get to that education. If they start to learn that that's available to them in an electronic form using technology, there'll be less stress on them when they're in the practice. They won't feel like they have to try to remember everything. If they know that if they forget something, they can just go home and pull up that information. Okay. Looking at your area demographics. Okay. If you look at the dashboards on your website statistics, you're going to kind of see who's coming to your sites. That's going to help you determine where you want to target them. If it's an older demographic, if it's a younger demographic, those types of things. You're going to want to kind of make sure across the board who's looking at what platforms. Tying them to the practice when they're not in those four walls. As technology improves and more products are coming to market, we need to help across the board integrate this in with our pet parents. And so, using remote, this is one of the things that happened during COVID. So for a long time, I've been talking to practices about, I guess what I refer to as reverse telemedicine, using technology when there's a drop-off scenario. I had a client that had 70% of their daily visits were drop-offs in the morning. And it occurred to me, there was a huge loss happening there because of those drop-offs. And everybody's like, huge loss? How can there be a loss? Okay, well, think about it. When you're in the exam room, how many times when you're doing an exam does the client go, oh yeah, by the way, or ask a question, or you're able to explain something to them? In that drop-off scenario, those things weren't happening. They weren't getting that information. I mean, the technicians and nurses were trying to do it at the end of the day. I give them tons of credit. But as a pet owner, talk about stress. They're coming in at the end of their workday. They're trying to pick up a pet. That pet is all excited to see them. They're probably balancing children while they're at it. And this, your staff is trying to explain to them all the things they need to know. Well, what would happen if you were able to schedule an appointment with them during their lunch hour where you could bring the pet into the exam room? It could just be on a phone call, or it could be video, however you need to do it. And you have that pet owner on the phone while you're doing that exam. Because it's stressful for them not to be there as well, and they want to be a part of it. So having them be able to be part of that exam, even though they're not in there, that's kind of cool. The doctor's got the pet, but the pet owner is still involved. Now we still have the education happening that normally happens. And if there's anything that kind of pops into the client's mind, oh yeah, the dog did this, or the cat was acting this way. Those things come out a lot in the exam room. So thinking about how do we kind of change it up, doing reverse telemedicine. Obviously, we know telehealth, telemedicine was something we had to really move towards during COVID, and it moved into the parking lot idea. And the parking lot idea is a lot like the drop-off idea, right? The pet owner is out in the car and you have the pet. Telehealth, telemedicine, you have the pet and the doctor's on the phone. So that's, kind of a different scenario there a little bit as well. But using all of these different types of technology to help meet them where they are. Just because COVID is kind of past us and we don't have to do parking lots anymore, a lot of these busy pet parents are stressed just trying to get their pets to the vet. The veterinarians are packed full, trying to accommodate, right? So how cool would it be if you were able to do the reverse telemedicine, have pets dropped off, and then be able to schedule those appointments with those pet owners? I think that could go a long way to reducing stress. It probably doesn't take quite as many staff because you're not, you don't have the pet owner there the whole time. So think about working some of that, bring it back, right? It's stuff we did during these 2 years to kind of adapt and adopt. But think about, how do we use that in the future to meet these pet parents where they're at? They're super busy with soccer and everything else. How do we meet them and still do what we need to do for these pets? I think that's super important. And even talking to your clients about it, what types of things could we do in our practice that could accommodate you or make things easier for you to get your pet in for service? Because I think this is something we're going to start really seeing here in the next 6 months or so. We're kind of getting that year past. So if they did get a pet and they did get vaccinations, now we're coming into that realm where might be time for more vaccinations, or even some of the puppies and kittens. So I think we're going to have to start thinking about, how do we accommodate for this, and how do we move forward and be able to get that done. Also thinking about other ways to use callbacks and utilizing our technology to have that help us. So most of the practice management systems out there today can help you with texting. So you can send text reminders out to your clients so that they're coming back in. There are services that do all sorts of things through the artificial intelligence, where they kind of know what services you did, and maybe they're just checking up on the pet, and that's all automated. So it's using technology to help across the board keep in contact with your client. I think modern software systems are going to start to be more intelligent in how they capture medical records. I think they will start to do more automatic bundles and that type of stuff more than they do so today, so that more time can be spent on the pet and less time on the record side of things. It takes time for all of that to grow and for all of that to kind of mature across the board as we're using it. There are a lot of things in the software systems today that can help you with an efficiency through the practice. If you're not using a whiteboard, for example, think about workflow and how things kind of move through a practice. If you have the ability to set up a whiteboard so that people have access to seeing who's where, you'll help eliminate some of the stress, because you might be able to move people through a little faster when there's more visibility. Also thinking about what types of things come through the front office or through the front desk, using other kinds of technologies to communicate amongst each other, so that those conversations don't happen kind of from staff to staff in front of other clients. So there's a lot of different ways we can utilize technology to help add to the fear-free environment overall. We know the different things that we can do for the pets, but using the technology to focus on the pet parent is going to help go a long way. We can't really give them a lot of shots and things. It's probably just not recommended. But there are a lot of calming aromas that can happen as well. So think about some of those things. That's not so tactical as it is anything else, but I think all of us, it's just really kind of being aware. And that's what happened to me as I was sitting there. I'm like, I just had never thought of it before. All these different little things that we could be doing to help our clients, which in turn just helps that pet. So with that, I'm going to see if there are some questions. I think I blew through that a little bit quick, but that's okay. I'm hoping that we'll have a good Q&A session.
Yeah, that was great, Nancy. I think that was very valuable. I was taking notes as you were going through things, and I could relate to a lot of what you were talking about. I think one of the things that really jumped out at me, I used to, when I was teaching younger vets and interns, about the verbalizing your exam to clients, and how many times I would get through my entire exam early in practice, and the client would then go to check out at the front desk, and they would tell the CSR, she didn't even look at my pet. And I'm like, we were in there for a half an hour. Like, what did you think I was doing that whole time? So I think that's a really valuable tip. I have a question. I want to start off our Q&A session with the reverse telemedicine, which I think is a really great idea for those drop-off appointments and the curbside appointments. When you're recommending that or thinking about putting that into a practice, or recommending it to a practice, do they schedule shorter blocks for that? Is this like are they taking up the same amount of time that a normal appointment block would, or is it a shorter amount of time? Will you talk about
It's
that a little bit?
Yeah, it's going to be usually shorter when I talk to them about it because there's a lot of things they can do that don't need to involve the client. So if there's going to be routine vaccinations and all that, that can happen outside of that call. It's generally just that little bit of time that has a doctor with their hands on the animal and they're actually doing that exam. So they can just be talking about, okay, the ears are great, and verbalizing it there. They're forced to verbalize it because they've got the client on the phone. So it doesn't have to be a long session. It can certainly be a shorter session. And most people get a break during work. So, it's just a matter of kind of changing up the workflow in the practice to ask the question at drop-off time, what would be a good time for this to happen? And the doctor can maybe work those exams in between other on-site exams. It was
Yeah.
interesting because I was on a panel in January of 20, and we were talking about telehealth, telemedicine, and reverse telemedicine. And I had a lot of people question about it because they had drop-offs. I started getting calls in March. Wait a minute, I attended your session. What were you talking about? Did you know this was coming?
Right.
No, it was all about drop-offs,
Mhm.
so it
Yep.
was kind of interesting, but it happens. A lot of people are using it.
Yeah, and there was a little side conversation in the chat about just that loss of information with drop off appointments, um and when I was in practice still during COVID and doing curbside, I felt the same thing, like just that loss of information, even just, talking over the phone to the owner who's sitting out in the parking lot. But I just can't communicate those things as well over the phone. I'm a talker. I'm Italian. I use my hands. I draw pictures. I do a lot of stuff. I can't do that over the phone. So I felt like there was a lot of lost information. Vivian was asking if we could re-explain what the reverse telemedicine exam was. If you don't mind just
Yep.
kind of summing that up again for Vivian, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So basically, where it came from was I recognized practices have drop-offs. So your pet is dropped off in the morning, and sometime during the day it gets worked into for exams with the doctor. What I realized was that, again, like we were talking, there's an education loss, there's, possible information loss because you don't have that pet owner right there during the exam. So the reverse telemedicine idea is that the doctor has the pet and is scheduling a phone or a video appointment with the pet owner who could be at work, who could be at home, wherever they are during drop off or during parking lot practice. They were in the parking lot, right? But having them available during that time that exam is happening. So when we hear about telemedicine, we generally are thinking, okay, we're at home and the doctor's at the clinic or wherever, and our pet's with us, and we're trying to, talk to the doctor about what's wrong. This is the reverse. The doctor has the pet, but we want the pet owner to still get that education and that information. Hopefully
I
that
think it's a
helps.
great,
Not ask
yeah,
again.
no, yeah, that was perfect. I think it's a great idea. And I did snippets of it. Definitely, we didn't do it, full on, but we tried to do some FaceTime exams and things like that,
Mhm.
because I think it also gives value, to what has been done when they're out of sight of their owner. Because again, if the owners don't see what we're doing, or see what's happening to their pet, they lose that value sense of what they're paying for. And I found when I was in practice, more questions about paying for things when they had dropped off or they weren't there to know that it truly had gotten done. And it had, but they didn't see us do it. So
Right. And that's the same
what
way with the verbalization. I mean,
mhm.
that realization really hit me one time when I was a practice I had been working with, and the doctor's like, you wouldn't believe the reviews we're getting. Best bet, and he's like, I didn't change anything other than I have to verbalize now because somebody's typing my notes in. So it was kind of interesting.
I love it. Iraj had a good question. She's at a multi-location practice in New York. She was wondering if you have any software recommendations for online booking for practices like that have multiple locations. She said in their current practice, because the phones are constantly ringing, the CSRs kind of don't get to do that special human animal bond with new clients and patients. So they're missing out on that.
So, so that's a big topic. That's a
If you
really
could
big
sum it up in
topic.
a minute, that would be great, Nancy.
Software is a beast on its own. I guess, I mean, there's a lot of solutions, and I'd be happy to talk offline about what that possible solution could be. I mean, in thinking about having an appointment hotline type of scenario where, it's a little different than the CSR role where all they do is schedule appointments. But if there's questions or intake information, have a CSR do that information so that they're not losing that client patient or that client relationship with the clinic. As far as software, several of them can handle multiple locations with just a click in their appointment book. Others don't do it so well. But there's a lot more questions about software in general that would have to come in before you could say, I don't know of an actual just plain appointment solution. Most of them are integrated in with the practice management software.
Yeah. And there are some great companies out there that are doing kind of that remote CSR or remote tech, like to do some of that phone triage or phone appointment. So it's not even coming into your practice. The phones aren't ringing in the practice like that. So those are always options too, to think about, kind of like what you're saying, that appointment hotline. I love that.
Yep.
Lynn was asking about suggestions for inter-office communications because everyone is so busy and running around.
I am getting that question a lot lately with the practices I'm working with. And right now I'm working with one, we're trying to develop a communication tree. There's a lot of products out there. There are things like Slack. There are some of the software practice management softwares actually have the ability to communicate with staff within them. It just depends on what that communication is supposed to be for. Anytime it has to do with the pet or the pet owner or an account, I really strongly advise people to get that into something that's recorded, whether it be in their record or whatever. If you're just trying to chat amongst each other, hey, everybody, lunch is in the lunchroom, something like Slack's not a bad idea. But when we're talking about pet owners and pets and histories, we want to try to make sure that gets into the software.
Good idea. Slack is everybody's jumping on Slack in the chat saying how they love Slack. We use Slack at Fear Free. And yeah, that's what I spend a lot of my day on is on Slack.
I have several channels of Slack on my computer right now. It's like, who's dinging me down?
Many. Yep.
It's
many.
Unless it's a paid version of Slack, it doesn't keep history super long. And so that's why I caution my practices. But it has to do with an account. It needs to go in something a little bit more permanent.
Yeah. And actually one of our attendees who does some practice evaluations for us, Nanette, is wonderful. She was just mentioning, just a reminder, it's not for secure information. So don't put anything that's secure into Slack, but it is great for inter-office communication. It's great for alerting team members to things. Along those lines of what Nancy was saying, there's a lot of options in PIM software now to have inter-office communication and alert people, patient is in room 3 and it'll pop up on the screen on whatever. I think some of them you can even set it like it'll show up on the treatment room computer or wherever, so that it will alert the right people to what needs to be discussed. So I think that's really great.
Yep.
Kelvin had a question about posting videos while using fear-free methods and sending videos to owners. Do we feel that that's okay to keep doing it? I'll answer from a fear-free perspective, and I'll let Nancy kind of answer from a client relations and that kind of fear-free. Absolutely. If you're using fear-free methods and you want to post that on social medias, online, things like that, tag us in your posts. We would love that. If you want to send videos to owners in terms of things, I can only speak for myself. I was a big fan of sending owners videos or pictures of their pets while they were in the hospital. I think it helps with that human animal bond. It bonds them to you as a practice. I love getting pictures from my dog at doggy daycare every day. So I fall into that pet owner category, but I'd love to get your thoughts, Nancy.
No, I totally agree. I think that is another one of those stress relievers, right? We fear the unknown. If we don't know what's going on and we haven't heard from anybody because the practices are crazy busy, they can't update us every 5 minutes. But if somebody can text me a picture in a hurry, look, he's, smiling and wagging his tail. Great. Now I'm okay. So no, I don't see a problem continuing that if that's a practice you've been doing.
Yeah, I think it works really well for post-op recovery pictures too. I used to love sending my pet owner and clients pictures of our nurses recovering their pets from surgery, because that's one of those like feel good moments, especially like if you have them bundled up in a cute little blanket and they're getting, somebody's tending to them. I think people love that and they bond with them, and that's what they're in their office showing their neighbor, being like, look, my dog just had surgery and look what they just sent me, like this great picture. So
Yep.
Annette had a question. Do you use personal phones or a company phone? I'll let Nancy give her thoughts on that.
So I guess I'm not sure what the phones are for.
In terms of the sending the videos and things like
Oh,
that.
the videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I always prefer that it's a practice device, right? And I prefer that it's, the practice device stays on the practice network and we don't have personal phones on the practice network. So that's not always practical, but it is the advised way to do it. Same way, I also recommend practices not use personal emails. I recommend having a practice branded email. Every staff member has their own practice branded email. That goes a long way to showing your clients that you're professional and tying them back to you all the time. It's easy. It's also protection for you as a practice, so that that email or whatever was sent via that email is not walking away with that staff member if they were to leave. So, I mean, it's definitely advised to have practice-based equipment.
And I think there's ways that you can email so that it will text to a phone. I forget. I used to be able to do it, but I think you can send an email like with a video and it'll show up as a text on somebody's phone. I just forget how you do it.
There were apps. I haven't used one for a long time, but there were apps that would do some of that. That would do a
Yeah.
fax too, weirdly
Yeah.
enough. But yeah, I mean, there's different ways of going about it. But
Yeah.
anytime we're talking personal devices, I'd prefer to see practice devices being used. And they don't need to be super expensive devices either. They can be just some basics that are, and maybe they don't even need to, they just, as long as they've got internet access using the clinic internet, that helps them.
Yeah. I loved what you mentioned in the beginning, Nancy, about forms and trying to get as much of that stuff done ahead of time. I think that's super helpful. I mean, I think about my own doctor visits for myself or my kids, like how many times I get a text message beforehand of go ahead and check in here, fill out these forms. And a lot of times they're auto populated for me and I just have to click through them and it's great. And I know we're trying to embrace more and more of that in the veterinary industry. We always seem to lag behind the medical industry on these things. Do you have any favorite like apps or PIM systems and that really incorporate those types of things ahead of time for clinics?
I mean, a lot of them, especially the cloud products, are doing it through whatever portals and things. I mean, I'd like to see more auto population going on, but that's not happening yet.
Right.
They're just basically more just forms that people are filling out. A lot of people use FormStack to create forms, and they're just attached to their website. Any way we can get that information is beneficial these days, for sure. So, that's. I don't have a specific, and I will never actually give a
Yep.
specific. That's part of the whole idea behind making
Yep.
sure we get what we need for our products. But
Yep.
yeah, a lot of the cloud-based ones have some of that access already.
Yeah, that's great. I know for those, there were a couple of comments about finding out pet triggers ahead of time. Don't forget, we have some of those forms built into your membership through Fear Free. We have our pre-visit questionnaire, which is available that will ask those types of questions, and you can download that from our website and then use it within your PIM system or however you're sending out forms, emails, however you're doing that to your clients ahead of time. And I agree with Nancy. I think the more we can do ahead of time so that check-in process is streamlined, and then trying to do things like checkout in the rooms if we can to kind of streamline that process as well. Nancy, are you seeing more and more practices start to think about how they use ChatGPT or some of these generative AIs to educate clients, or is everybody still a little bit more scared of it?
I think people are experimenting with it across the board. I'm more concerned about people going to it looking for answers that they should be looking to their vet for, versus the vet practice. I mean, there's been different articles that have come out there. Oh, it found blah 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 blah. Yeah, well, if you'd let them run all the tests they needed to run, it probably would have confirmed that that was real and not just made
Mhm.
an artificial guess at it, is what I would call it. So
Right.
I think we just need, as a whole, whether it's in the practice or our own personal, personal daily life, need to be aware that these tools are out there and there will be people that don't use them properly. We just need to be aware and kind of keep an eye out for them, is what it amounts to.
Yeah, our industry is certainly not set apart from not being impacted by the generative AI and other areas of AI that are going on. I know it's a big discussion in the veterinary industry right now. So AI can be good for us in some ways, but it definitely has some pitfalls that we're going to have to figure out as we're going forward. So
Yep, yep.
um,
It'll be interesting to see where it goes. I
it
mean,
will be.
I'm waiting to see what some of the new technology providers are going to start using it for and how they're going to start using it. That's what I'm excited to see.
Yeah.
So it's coming.
It's coming. Well, this was very helpful. I think people got lots of really great tips out of this, ways to incorporate more technology into their practices to help improve efficiency, which is something we all are looking to do, whether we're in practice or not in practice, trying to just be more efficient. I'm constantly looking for ways to make my day more efficient, whether that be AI or some other program that I'm trying to use. But I think this was super helpful. Nancy, thank you so much. This webinar was recorded, so it will be available on our education library. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everybody. Make sure you
Bye,
let us know if you have
everyone.
questions. Bye bye.